You have to ask yourself, what would be the reason why you have to stay there for 10 years, spend $500 billion so far, and continue spending $10 billion a month for an operation on a country and a people that have not harmed you in any way?
Right. These are very good things that we're bringing up tonight, because we need to think about each one of these things independently. And one thing I thought about recently about 9/11 is I think it's a test to see what else they can get away with. Because if they can convince a whole country that you have to take the risk of going into economic servitude for this little war that we're having, when they start saying things like that, you've got to wonder what it's really all about. Now, that point you brought up about human trafficking is very important, because people are constantly saying we have to have more troops in Afghanistan to, ready, drum roll, protect the women. Yes, we're hearing this a lot.
Yes.
How safe are women, do you think? Well, there's pros and cons.
Yes,
you do understand.
Yes, I mean, I think for those people who are concerned about the conditions of women and what a U.S. troop withdrawal might mean, they should just read Malala Yousafzai's book, A Woman Amongst Warlords. She spoke here at Willamette last April. I mean, she started, traveling in this country speaking. Malala Yousafzai, who was a member of the parliament, and they should also read the RAWA, R-A-W-A, website, that is the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, to see what women, Afghan women in the diaspora, but also in Afghanistan, have to say about this occupation. I can summarize for them, and that is say, the women, even the ones who have been, quote, liberated, do not want to be occupied. So, it is true that the Taliban were misogynists, that women were kept in their homes, and that they were not going to universities or schools or working or just wandering around in the cities. Now if you go to Afghanistan, and I just came back June 15th, if you go in the cities, I would say about 10% of the Afghan women and girls have, quote, they have more freedom. So they can go to school, they go to university, they work in the government, they work maybe with other organizations, they can go shopping and so forth. But we're talking about 10%. 90% of the Afghan women are illiterate, and I would say 80% of them still live in the Middle Ages.
And one thing that we have seen increase is the rise of hardcore pornography being sold on the streets of Baghdad.
And
now,
on the streets of
what's
Kabul.
here in America. Imagine them seeing their own sisters in those situations in videotapes in the bazaar. And then that's bizarre.
Well,
and that's
unfortunately,
not right.
There is internet now, but the same pornography is a big problem, and people are with the parliament, and the clerics will put pressure on the Karzai government saying, what is this? Is this freedom? Is this democracy? Is this what you want? And then he will do something for a while, and then it's back to, so for the vast majority of the women, life in fact has become harder, because a lot of the men have disappeared. They're in prison. There are thousands and thousands of Afghans all over the country. There are American prisons managed by the Americans, to which even the Red Cross cannot go. The Afghan government doesn't have access to that. So a lot of men have disappeared, or have been killed, or have been maimed, and women are left with major responsibilities in a country where, as I said, 85% of the women are illiterate, and there's no work to be done, and they have no money. So life for women, for most women, in fact, has become harder under the occupation than better and easier.
There's something else that I've also been thinking about over the past few years. My father, for example. Now, my father is someone that he and I have a difference of opinion on just about everything, but things really took an interesting turn when I began to do this and do this show. And he chose to work for the U.S. government as a contractor, not in the military, but as a translator. Now, I hear that there's a lot of, this is not a safe job for him to be doing, because there's a lot of people that are assassinated. So he has chosen to,
I think I would advise against it, but I don't know him.
Well, I do. You have a way of being calm about some of these things, where I am naturally emotional about some of it. How do you, just to kind of ask the question bluntly, because I was saving it tonight, how do you not get angry sometimes? How do you stay, in a way, peaceful and also have a certain acceptance about things and the world as it is, without getting lost in it all?
Well, to be honest, Alex, it pains me a lot, because my mother still lives in Afghanistan. You know, I have sisters and mothers, nephews, nieces, relatives, classmates from my older days. I have teachers and associates. I mean, I know a lot of people. So when I go, and I have been going every year for the last 10 years to help, you know, rebuild higher education, and we can talk about education. I see this, and I understand that I'm fluent both in Pashto and in Farsi. And I can hear things. People tell me things that they won't tell to other people or foreigners. So it's very painful for me to see this country, these people, because, you know, this was the poorest and least developed country on the planet to begin with. And there has been this war of one kind or another, occupations, wars, civil wars for the last 35 years. So you can imagine, everyone has been traumatized. Everyone has a horrible story. Every family has a tragedy. There's not a place or a family or a tribe or a person who hasn't been touched in some way, including my own family. So it does pain me, but what can you do? I mean, what I try to do, I do get mad, I do get very angry, and I, you know, it saddens me to see my adopted country here waging war on the country of my origin, you know, the most powerful country, and 46 other countries waging war on, you know, my country of origin. It is painful, but my hope is that, you know, ultimately people need to think that my hope is that we will try to think of alternative ways of solving conflicts and issues between people, between countries, between, you know, ethnic groups, racial groups, and so forth. You know, it would be very easy to sort of really get mad and throw a tantrum, but you know, that doesn't help people, so, or it doesn't help the country. So what I have been trying to do is, I learn something here and I try to share it with the people there, my students, my colleagues, and so forth. I learn things there, I come back here and I talk to people, you know, I talk to whoever would want to listen to me, schools, universities, church groups, in the media, and so forth. Because I can tell you this, the Afghanistan invasion has not been the first American attack on some country, and it will not be the last one either. There will be many more every year, you can be sure, because
or 9/11 style. The Hitler's Reichstag with Poland is constantly referenced.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, people who know American history would say that on average the United States has intervened somewhere in one way or another every 2 years for the last century. And just in the last few months, the last year, let's say, the U.S. has been waging hot war in 6 countries. So I can't, you know, just easily get mad. I mean, my hope is that to educate people and make them understand it, and also my hope is to sort of to encourage some moral outrage, to encourage Americans to put pressure on the government, but also to demilitarize U.S. foreign policy. I mean, many Americans don't think about that. They don't realize that Petraeus was king in Afghanistan, not only in terms of all of the foreigners, including the American ambassador, Crocker or Eikenberry or whatever, but that he has even more power than, say, Karzai had. So he, I have to say, Petraeus lost the war in Afghanistan to these people with beards and turbans and sandals. The war is lost, and he's a broken man. But he will be fine, you know. When he's done with his CIA, then he will run for president, and he might even become another Eisenhower.
One other thing I want to bring up, since you brought up economic issues earlier, and the 10% of the women, on average, was it in schools currently or working in some form?
About, say, in public schools, about 35%.
35%
of them are girls. And then at the university level, maybe 16% of the university students are women.
You know, what's interesting, because in this country, in 1913, we had the Federal Reserve created, that little institution that's not a real actual federal institution, the corporate institution set up to get money for war. And so we saw this whole females liberation movement in the 1960s that many people, it's not that there isn't some freedom experienced by women today that weren't free 50 years ago, without getting too deep into all that, but it's believed that that was set up to pull more money into the Federal Reserve System for the military-industrial complex to generate more money that can be used for destructive purposes. Everywhere the U.S. has gone, they've set up these central banks. Even China has a very interesting central bank with many Western ties and ties to Bank of America. It's amazing how much you can trace when you simply follow the money with these guys.
Well, the money issue is interesting because Afghanistan right now is in the midst of a serious financial crisis.
Of all the times to have it.
Other than the government crisis. That is to say, you probably have read in the press about last December, a year ago, or in the last 6 months, months, it was found out that Kabul Bank, which is the largest private bank in Afghanistan, and essentially the major shareholders are relatives of the Karzai and the vice presidents, you know, and some other influential people. Well, $1 billion disappeared from this bank last year. People just took the money, $1 billion. And this is our money. Remember, this was our money, either through contracts. This is the bank which pays all of the civil servants.
Right.
The civil servants are paid through the Kabul Bank, which is private. Teachers. The military, the police.
Well, that sounds like justification for us to be there forever.
Well,
after all there's theft going on, I mean, we have to be there.
Well,
and yet they could have set up that thief to take the money the whole time.
But
and just
what happened was, you know, $1 billion was just taken out or given as loans or spent on people's campaigns, including President Karzai's campaign. And the U.S. Treasury had advisors at this bank. I mean, there are Americans in most organizations now as advisors, you know, or shadow governments and so forth. But the IMF said to the Afghan government just about a month ago, either you clean up your financial situation or you cannot receive any more aid from any country. So the country now, which is desperate, it could use even $1 to $1 billion, is not receiving any money because of this theft, massive fraud and theft from the private bank by people who are now in government, you know, and you know, they just took the money.
And what's wrong with me about that old phrase about money being the root of all evil?
Well, money is in a way, because you mentioned the military-industrial complex. I would expand now. That is to say, it's now the military, industrial, intelligence, terrorism, academic, media complex.
Oh, yes.
There are a lot of organizations and people, individuals who are making a lot of money.
We haven't covered vaccinations.
Right.
There's many things coming out about the poison in the vaccine. So we're finding out stuff about Pakistan, Afghanistan, where people are getting sick from these.
Well, not just that, but the point is that, you know, a lot of people are making a lot of money. It's estimated that since 2002, the U.S. has given about $70 billion in aid to Afghanistan. But of that $70 billion, this is a major report came out by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about a month ago. It's big. It's a big, very good report. And this report says of this $70 billion that has gone to Afghanistan, 3 cents for every dollar was spent on development and humanitarian issues. 97 cents were spent on the military, the police, the intelligence, the army. So that tells you something about the aid. That's why the country is poorer now than it was, say, earlier. And things cost more, you know. And yet there has been very little development because money doesn't even enter the country. It goes to somebody's bank account in London or in New York.
People have been suspecting that from day one. From the moment these wars started, that this whole thing was a giant money laundering operation in addition to occupation.
Yes.
I do want to mention one thing real quick, though. You mentioned Karzai.
Yes.
And so when people want to debate about Obama, it's very sad when they fall in the racial box and they think because he's a darker shade of tone that maybe America's becoming freer, because we have examples like Karzai.
Yes.
We have examples like all of these African dictators.
Yes.
They're doing the most unspeakable things to their own people that have been installed by CIA-supported governments.
Well,
now, as you may know, some of these revolutions are funded by the CIA that are taking place in different parts of the Middle East.
They're trying to derail the revolution. I think the struggles,
but you feel there's some genuine struggles too taking place.
Well, the thing about Afghanistan is that we have known that Karzai and his brother and some of the other prominent people, like the former head of the intelligence, the National Security Directorate, Amrullah Saleh, you know, the foreign minister, the whole government. Karzai said it. I heard it on television. He said, "We have been getting money from the American government and CIA cash for years and years." So he has been working, you know, for CIA. His brother, who was assassinated about 3 weeks ago, the New York Times and everybody knows that he was on the CIA payroll because he is part of the quote counterinsurgency. He has he managed the militia at the Kandahar strike force. Ahmad Wali Karzai. And that's why he was assassinated in his own living room. So a lot of these people, including Karzai, you know, I mean, no one knew Karzai until December 2001 in the Bonn conference. You know, he was produced because he was a compromised candidate, and he has no base. He really has no base. The way he deals is through peonage and patronage. You know.